Hi, and welcome to the new people. I'm Ellie Shore, and I've been running the salons here in this wonderful art center for 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Twice a month. And we have a tremendous diversity of different kinds of artists doing very different kinds of work. And it's always new and always exciting and always slightly different in terms of who comes, and it's always a slightly different mix. I met Donna because I started going to the projects in Fort Lauderdale and saw her work several times at different installations in the projects and was totally fascinated.
Thank you.
And wanted to know more, and then got to know her and definitely want to know more. Donna has an MFA from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts.
That's a long one.
And has traveled around the United States, lived in different places since then, and is a Floridian by birth and in growing up, and came back to Florida. She's been here 9 years, and I'm excited to hear her.
All right. Well, thank you for having me and for the center. Thank you guys for coming tonight. I was going to say just a little bit about, my schooling. I went to Maryville College in Tennessee for my undergrad, which was the first place I've moved since Florida. And then Philadelphia for my grad school, where I focused in painting at first, and then went into an idea of conceptual sculpture, which is what I'm more into now. But I really go across a lot of varieties of media. After I got my MFA, I got the Joan Mitchell Foundation grant that was given for students in getting their MFA to realize their career as an artist. And I decided to go to Italy for a little bit and go explore Europe. And then I ended up out in New Mexico, actually. I was either going to go to New York or do something different. And I went to New Mexico, spent about 4 years out there, did a lot of crazy, fun projects. Showed a lot of work, and finally realized I wanted to come back, I think, to the beach. I don't know if it was the water, but found myself back here, and I teach full time, and I'm down in the Fat Village with my studio, and show you some of my work from here. I put some slides together, just a little bit of where I was in graduate school, because I feel like that's where, of course, I kind of found my voice through the master's program. And at the end, I really started getting into doing these books and getting to this idea of conceptual sculpture. I was doing a whole concept on silence, and I feel like it's the first place that I got into working with text. Before, I was very much a painter, which I'm kind of coming back to, but this is kind of where I started. I was doing this whole idea of silence, using books, found furniture, and this is where I really started getting into the idea of text and telling stories, which is pretty much where I am now. And I was really looking at the book as subject matter, and I had no idea that it would bring me to where I am now. So these were some pieces that were part of my MFA show. I was cutting up books, which I'm still doing some resin pieces, and they were all revolving around the story, but the story was pretty silent then. So I was cutting all my books apart. And then this was kind of a culmination at the end of my years there. I revisioned this desk, but I was getting into working with a lot of physics, it seemed like. This was a fountain. This was my first idea of a fountain, and where the books were bleeding ink. So this was kind of the end of that series, and I realized it again. So this was just kind of a little bit of where I was, and then coming into where I am now. It's a little detail of it. And the stories, text, home, and interiors. This is kind of where I came from, the text part. This is one of my favorite pieces, Stream of Consciousness. This was that desk realized probably about 3 years later. I wanted to reinvent it. I had a lot of trouble, as most sculptors know, with making things work, and working with water is not fun or easy. So I finally realized a lot of the physics. This is called Stream of Consciousness, and I was really getting into the story of our collective conscious. The book there is made out of resin. All the words in the back came from my psychology book. And I felt like the ink coming out of the books finally was like this babbling kind of thing that happens in our brain over and over again, our subconscious, that really never stops. And this was the idea of that, keep going and going and going, and it was at our subconscious. I feel like it's very surreal. I feel like I am founded in some idea of surrealism. And most of the books were made with resin, and there was a pretty funny story that happened with this. The resin just turned red. It was like blood was really coming out of the books. And it was actually a chemical reaction, of course, happening right before show. It was going up an hour before the show. And we were all joking that it was like stigmata or something. We're like, it's bleeding, on itself. Things happen. This piece has always had a life of its own, for sure, just how it functions. But it was a pretty fun piece. So that's where I started getting into text. These groups that I put together are mainly some paintings and drawings that deal with the stories, but where I used quite a bit more text. I've always looked at handwriting, stories passed down, and that idea of the text being some kind of a texture in my work. This piece is called Cleaning House. This is more of an autobiographical story about all my past lovers and cleaning house with them and throwing them out the door and all the bullshit lines they gave me after a while. So there's a little bit of fun to this. But, they kind of sit on the bottom like a pile of flies. And I was getting into this story of, just cleaning everything out. And you can see these are all vinyl letters. This piece is about 7 feet tall, so it was a very big, tall piece that just sold in New York, which was really exciting. And I do try to disguise the text. I want you to read some of the story, but of course keep a little bit of it hidden, because I think that helps with the ambiguity. And I want people to, the reason I started with stories is I really believe it's the soul of our existence. I think it's why we're here. And the object of my work is I want people to hopefully connect with the story so that they can, of course, carry on and tell their own stories. This one is a to-do list, a smaller piece that basically outlines everything from doing the dishes to getting married to finding a mate, having a job, kind of the overwhelming job that we do every day, kind of falling through our hands. And in this series that's coming through here, I was really interested in using hands, just something that I enjoy drawing, but using hands to show, this idea with the text areas. The next one was also, but crumbling fears, the same idea. I had all my fears kind of leaving myself. And these are all works on paper and just done with graphite. So true drawing. And the next one works with text in a new way. I actually did this over a year. This is Course of the Relationship. And every time I got off the phone with the person I was involved with, I wrote down something. So it was kind of fun to go over a whole year and to work on a piece for a whole year. The next one is, this is Forgiveness. And I'm still working with text. And this one I actually, I'm a teacher. I teach in the public schools. I used to be a substitute teacher, which is a fun job. And I had a little first grade class that was not too nice to me. And they sent me all these letters that said, I'm sorry. And I saved them and saved them and saved them. And I knew there was something that I would be using them for. And I did this piece about forgiveness. These are mostly my autobiographical stories, mainly on relationships. I think I was interested in addressing those. And I used them as a collage in here. And of course, the sewing is the mending together of some relationship. These, I started getting into doing a little bit more installation with the drawings. This piece is called Longing, and it's about a long-distance relationship. They're actually ceramic hands phone cords connected into them, male and female, and in between are handwriting. I love handwriting, and it is ideas of text going back and forth. In our text age, I didn't want to use a computer text, but I did do the piece from actual text going back and forth between a person and I.
Did you have a specific relationship in mind when you were doing it?
Yeah, I was going through a relationship. I think most of these pieces were maybe a little bit of an outlet, but this was a long-distance relationship that slowly ended. And this is a close-up. I use, of course, a lot of models, and my family has become involved a lot in my pieces. And this is my father's enormous hands, so I had male and female hands. After this, I still was working with some hands, and I started to get into doing a lot of image transfers. Just playing around with them, specifically, you find a new medium, you love it, and I was really still working a little bit with these and using this text in the way. This was the first. I usually try to do a self-portrait every year, and this was the first self-portrait I did without, an actual face or a portrait. So these were just some words that were going through my mind at that time, who I was, growing, getting stronger at that time, that year. And I went to Spain and found some really awesome postcards of these women. And I think that they were probably actresses of some kind. I tried looking them up, the history behind them, but I kind of took them and internalized them and kind of made stories about them, I guess. I love the look on their face. I tried to make this idea of who these women were. This one's called Spill, and the red, was just trying to make some story from these women. But I mainly just loved the look of them, and I was getting into using, this technique with the image transfer and trying to step into photography a bit, which is a new medium for me. This one is called Home, and where I did self-portraits in the middle, something like a broken home. I was thinking of this woman coming from her gaze and using myself as reference. And this one's Pills, kind of about the pills that we might take to be a little bit more sane. I thought that she had this kind of crazy look, but I wasn't interested. It was an experiment. Could I make stories about people, make them believable about these women? They're in their 20s, probably around the 20s, and have different ideas behind them.
Donna, as a frame of reference, what size are these approximately?
These are small. These are probably 8 by 10.
Okay.
Yeah, these are smaller. The other ones were large scale. This was, how many cats is too many? Tried to add a little bit of humor in my work, and these are actually all my cats. So one of them's gone. I only have 2 now. I'm not the cat lady yet. And then this was the last one from this series. And this one has little pieces of money in it. It's called Shopping Accident, which I think came from my story many times of shopping without money, overspending. So she kind of has a dark cloud around her. The next series I felt like related more to home because there's so much more personal and autobiographical about myself. All mixed media, as far as my work, I try to let the idea dictate the medium. I really do go across medium. I don't think I have to be just a painter. I don't think I have to be just a sculptor. I really want to have the idea, find the images or the pieces that I want to work with. I collect a lot of things, and that kind of speaks to me. This one were doilies, which remind me of my grandmother. These were based on, this is called Wish, and all the little, I was doing image transfers still, all the little pictures inside were my lineage, all the women in my life. And of course it involves, the children that they have, and in between, I'll go back, there are wishbones that are sewn in there. I was saving some wishbones. And I think it was my wish, to maybe have kids someday or be a part of that lineage with the women in my family. But the doilies, I soaked them in tea, I soaked them in coffee, and it came into this kind of very feminine look to it. And those are all glasses that you can look through, so it enlarges the object a little bit more. And that's the close-up of it. And I spent pretty many weeks just sewing it together. This was probably one of the first installations that I did in Albuquerque. When I lived in I showed up in Albuquerque after going to Europe and found myself at a great art center as well. And they gave me some room to do my first bigger installation. And this woman actually is a woodcut that I did. She's an unknown woman in our family. This is called A Walk with Thine Unknown. And I was really stepping into these stories. I think, coming out of graduate school, you don't know who you are. You're learning about yourself. And this was, of course, a story about finding who I was. So each of the dresses, I made all the dresses. I made the fabric for them. And each one of them had, a personified woman. There's the wallflower, there's the queen person, there's the bride, there's the promiscuous one. This one is the wallflower that I made wallpaper with. And I think it was about finding my own identity. And by using this woman, which was so mysterious in our family, she did come from our family somehow. We don't know who she is. It was a mysterious photograph that I was working with. So she was Thine Unknown. And I did make a book that accompanied this. It has text on the wall. That eventually, we find that we don't fit into any norm. We are ourselves. And the moral of the story, that we create our own dress. We have our own identity. But I did make it look very fairy tale. And it was great making these dresses. I still have these. I've shown them in different ways since then. But this is where it originated from. Very fairy tale. I put moss in here and rocks. And the book, you could sit and read the book in the middle, which involved photography.
And you printed the images on the fabric.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I took a traditional woodcut class in graduate school, and I still do a lot of printmaking. It's the easiest thing to do. You don't need a press for it, so I still practice the traditional woodcut. And on fabric was a little tough. It was fun. It was a neat piece. So these, coming back to home, this was a piece that I did do a little bit in graduate school. It is my journals, which were really so much a part of me. This was from one year, pretty tumultuous year. Used to write a lot of journals. And what I did was I drilled into my journals and soaked them in tea and then sewed them back together as this kind of non-functional table. It doesn't have a top. And this piece is called Two Sides of Myself and Tea, Sewn Words. And it's really essentially the idea of me talking to myself. The dialogue that we have in a journal, you talk to yourself, you're having tea with yourself, basically. So love this piece. This is one of my favorites. This is 7 feet, I believe. It's a huge piece. And there's a little close-up of it, and you can see all the writing if you get a little bit closer. Very fragile, which I think worked, as that year was a fragile year for me. I love the shadows. And I actually got a piece here. I got a chance in the Fat Village area, the projects, to hang it. And this was years later, to see it in a new way, which was really fun. I had this idea, why don't I just hang it up and strap it up there? And I put a canvas on the bottom, and I was into tracing the patterns that were there, and that became part of a new piece. So it was like having a conversation again with myself, but in a new way. And you'll see the piece a little bit later. It became part of a swimming piece. Working with found objects, of course. This is slides, and these are my grandparents' slides from vacations past. And I decided to make a house, actually a church that was a replica for my grandfather, who was a minister. So these are all very personal to me. This is my home, I feel like. They were, my grandfather had passed away and my grandmother very soon after. And this was kind of an ode to them. A lot of people in the studio were like, oh, I should do that with my slides, because you never see them. But I really worked hard on using just the blue sky ones, trying to make it look like a sunset. And the bottom are these stairs that are kind of descending up to the house. And it had a very blue kind of look to it and spun around. There's a little close-up of it. This piece is about my financial situation. I did a lot of pieces on my financials, like most of us. And I think this was happening when everything was declining, which probably still is, but this was about the bottom falling out. And someone had given me a bunch of money bags from the bank. And so I actually used those and dyed them. It's green on the bottom. I sewed all these money signs, and on the back I did burned in my statements from the bank. So it was my actual finances that kept falling out of the bottom. But it was very much the economy was really plummeting, so much about the times. And you can see on the bottom.
What was this piece titled?
It was The Bottom Drops Out. And technically making it was really fun, actually, because I wanted to make like it was gonna fall over. But it was actually probably one of the most structurally sound sculptures I made, but I wanted to make sure, I want to make it look like it's falling over, and it's pretty strong. It's in a library now in Tennessee as a public sculpture. I did another piece, Paycheck to Paycheck. Did a lot about my finances, and on the bottom was a net of all the, nothing that I have, all the money that's gone burned through, and there's a little girl who is on the wire, going paycheck to paycheck. And I work with these chairs a lot. Maybe I have affinity for chairs, but I love these chairs. I have a lot of work done with chairs. This is my next piece with chairs. I don't know if it's a comfort or a place to sit. It's just, I love chairs. I want to buy all of them. I don't have enough room for them, but I love chairs. This was another piece that I was really working with the chair, looking like it was falling apart. And this is kind of my home with my mom. This is called With Her and Without Her. And this is with her. She puts us on a pedestal and holds us tight, and hand over hand, very, very gently. Almost the Princess and the Pea. We have the pillows that are holding us tight. And then without her, hanging, falling off. And I really worked with this chair, making it look like it had some personality that had fallen. And pretty much how I feel about my family. My mom's we have a lot of women in our family, a lot of women. So she's kind of our rock. And then something very, very personal to me, I'm a breast cancer survivor of 9 years now. Yeah, this May coming up will be 9. And it was important for me to do work about that. An installation, of course, with the text. I showed this first where I actually did the writing on the wall. And it's my story. I was diagnosed at 30, and I had a very rare type of cancer. The paintings on the wall were all done when I was going through treatments and finding out and getting diagnosed. And I wanted to, be open about it and talk to people about it because I was diagnosed so early, and I wanted to do a show, a piece about it to tell women and men that we need to. It was going through, I think, in the insurance companies where they're like, oh, don't worry, you don't have to, wait till you're 40, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. I was 30. It's, you got to check yourself early. And I thought that maybe presenting my story would help the dialogue of that happening. And it did, definitely. I made my own fabric to cover the chair that you see, the chair here. And this was kind of a toile. I had an idea of a toile. I did it with a photo silkscreen. And there's a close-up of it. It's a person going through surgery, running free, kind of the whole process that you go through. And on here is my story. It was a rare case. 1 in 2 million women get what I got, which was weird. And it definitely, being an artist, I don't know if you can help. I couldn't help not doing work about it. I don't know if it helped me heal, or I think it did. helped me in some way. I had a very big tumor. So I was doing some pieces where I guessed how big my tumor was. And then I got to reinvent it not too long ago. It's over the summer. And I had done a video actually where I washed all the words away from the previous installation, and I got to involve that on the wall as a video of actually washing the words away, I think, which was very therapeutic. And that was my piece on it. I've done a lot since then. This was a piece during the Reconstruction era where I'm reconstructing myself. Hammers, I was using all these, the house on the head, which is referencing Louise Bourgeois, one of my favorite artists, one of my favorite prints. And the house is, of course, yourself, and she is trying to, recover. And I also did a very large mural, which was really fun. This was a pretty untraditional mural because it's actually pencil. And I used some big graphite and then just sprayed it with an acrylic. And this is kind of, how you feel when you get diagnosed. You feel like you've been thrown out of your house. So I did a huge woman in Wynwood, still staying with my home and my house. And interiors. This is more of my sculptural work. I got into doing these interiors. I call them light boxes. And I think it came from thinking about, I have these, it's thinking about all these stories. I wanted to represent stories in a new way that people hadn't seen before. Some people call them dioramas, I think, but I feel like it goes a little bit beyond that because using a magnifying glass, it feels like you're looking into something, maybe looking into someone's head in some way or looking into their story. And this was the first piece I did with someone else's story. It was a woman in Taos, New Mexico. Her name is Rosemary, and she was just kind of a magical lady out there. She was mystical, she was nomadic. She came into my bar. I bartended, of course, being an artist for a long time. She drank scotch every day, would come into the bar. You would see her on the mesa 1 hour, and then I swear an hour later you'd see her in town, but she only walked everywhere, so she always seemed like this really mystical woman to me. She had lots of stories. She always walked with her hands behind her back and kind of bent over. She told me she used to go ice skating. I couldn't figure out where. But this whole piece done with sewing boxes, and it has a found book on top, or I'm sorry, an artist book, is basically just all about her and remembering who she was. And each little box inside, I don't know if you can see it right here, has a little vignette to it of little stories. And she loved everything on, I feel like in sculpture, if you're going to put something in a sculpture, it has to mean something. Like if you're going to use found object, every single object needs to mean part of your story. And that's how you can create your narrative.
Did she see it?
No, she didn't. She passed away, unfortunately. I did write her, but she had, I moved and heard that she had passed away. But I did send some pictures, and she didn't really have a lot of family out there. She just was a staple in Taos. I don't know, everyone knew Rosemary. So someday I think that this should belong somewhere in Taos, eventually. I just have to find the right area. This was the second piece I did with my light boxes, and this came from a totally different story. It's called Harvesting the Perfect Male. Having a little bit of fun, again, with relationships. I found object working with this mannequin, and the idea came from some girls hanging out, talking about the perfect male and how we could maybe grow him. And it's just supposed to be fun, have fun with it, looking like a cocoon on the bottom, and what's happening inside, which has been hard to photograph these, but looking inside, there's a man growing on top, and inside is a whole bunch of text that talks about the story, the actual story. And these are the interiors, you can see. The woman on the bottom is planting seeds. They're little paper mache sculptures, actually. And in the top, there's this man who's kind of growing out of a tree. And in the tree and around there are all these personality, everything that we wanted in a man that night, So all those are growing. She's planting and he is growing out of the tree. I use these leaves on a lot of my work. They're ceramic, or clay-based, a Fimo clay, and then I work with the putting tons and tons of different types of textures of paint on them. And then all of these have a magnifying glass, so it really kind of tweaks your view when you're looking inside of them, because they look a lot larger than they actually are inside. So it really enlarges them. And there's a little detailed close-up. The only thing with these is very hard to get pictures of them, so I've learned to start getting pictures before I put the glass in. Another piece, another story. Of course, I was a bartender for a long time, and this is the livery room. We have one side of this. It's crossed between the bar and the emergency room. And really, meant to be fun, tongue-in-cheek. In the inside are livers and scalpels, and a little bar inside, and on the top, I actually saved napkins. A lot of people draw on napkins at the bar, and I saved all those napkins, made the hands, and I used a prism lens, so when you look into it, it looks like you're drunk. Things are repeated, and they kind of go around. So it's meant to be fun, but it was tough. I mean, I worked in near Native American population, and a lot of the population can't handle the enzyme with liquor. And it was kind of sad. I did feel like sometimes that I was hurting some people, so I got out of the business at that point. But it was fun to do this piece. I did go and do another piece. This was interactive, and I started, really wanted to push the envelope. This is called 9 Little Deaths, and I'm still working on this. It is an interactive piece with other people talking about near-death experiences. I have had 9. Some are fun, they're not so heart-wrenching as, having cancer and getting over it, but, some are fun, like getting lost in the woods, and it's snowing out, jumping over rocks and almost falling, just those. I tried to think of these. And my idea is by sharing these are the insides. I had an icicle almost drop on me. I mean, they're fun kind of things, but you think about them. My idea is by telling my stories is that people on the other side can type their stories of near-death experiences, and by doing that, it brings us closer, because I think we know in society, anytime, even 9/11 happening, how much did we come together? And my idea was maybe this piece would help people come together by talking about their near-death experiences, either funny or serious. And on the other side, where the typewriter is, it says, near deaths bring people closer. So I have probably about 50 pages, and I'm planning to make a book with them. Some are quite revealing, some are anonymous, some people wanted to talk to me long time about them, and one, I remember I almost drowned and I was 5 years old and it's fresh in my mind. Sometimes it's good to reveal that and let it out to someone. So I think it was a very successful piece because it really created a lot of interaction. People posted them on the wall, we could read them, and it really put a community together. Really, I think one of the most successful for what I wanted my artwork to do, to share stories and for other people to share. It really brought together the community there. This is a small piece. This was just having a little bit of fun. I think my mom used to tell me this, where I always asked where the teeth go, and she said the tooth fairy made a house, and so I made my tooth fairy house. And these are all teeth. Some are found, which is kind of weird, and some are made. It's just a smaller piece, and my little story. And there's the keys, because she has to have the keys to get in somewhere. And then when you look inside, it's a very, very, very small keyhole, and there's a little flicker of the tooth fairy in there. And all the furniture is made of little teeth. I mean, I just imagined when I was little, this must be what, she does, for sure. This was done right down the road here at Shotel. at the hotel that you can turn a room into an installation. And I thought, this is great. I should make a big door and make it just like one of my sculptures. And so I did that. I have people looking in. I made a big lens myself, and this is called Objects of My Affection. And I was interested in those objects that you keep. I have a feather that I kept forever, a charm bracelet, my grandmother's letters, the things that you hold on to that are part of you. And I put them on display so that hopefully other people would think of, what they have, their keepsakes. People loved reading my grandmother's letters. And I had these students of mine that were actors or actresses. Do we call them actors now? I had made their costumes, and they presented all these pieces with hand on hand on hand. And I made these objects into big sculptures. And so they would kind of present them to the audience as very special objects. And in the background, you can see are all the stories, the text of why these were significant to me. And they were in trunks. They would put gloves on, and they were very, very holding them, like they were the special objects that they were. This one was my heart, of course. I had a feather, an owl ring, a charm bracelet, and a heart. And all the stories were written on their outfits, too. And this is fun. At Showtell, you can do a room however you want. It was really fun to work with that. And it was interesting, the audience wanted to go in, but I had a door there. And I'm like, you can't go in, So it was kind of like this voyeur kind of thing almost, too. And I had this little drawer. People started giving the girls, like, pennies or something of them, like something that they had, it was weird how the audience worked with it. But, when you do something performance, I wasn't performing, but it was weird how people reacted. I used the door again recently. I think some of the people have seen this one. You were in it. This was just a fun kind of dream that I had. And using the idea, again, this is called the Motherlode of Invention. I had this idea that you get the best ideas in the shower or in some kind of water. And it's interesting, I did a little research, and a lot of writers think that. And I always think, what if we had, a sketchboard in there or something like that. So this was kind of just a funny idea. When I was approached for doing the undone room, I thought, this will be perfect. I'll make a room that is all about this, a bathroom in some way. And I got an actor again. And I have a typewriter, and I did a trompe-l'oeil on all of the drawing is all like a trompe-l'oeil kind of drawing of a bathroom with a bidet. And of course I had to have my fireplace in there and chandelier, very decadent. And he is typing and typing and typing all his ideas, but then shredding them away, because it seems like when you have those ideas in the shower, they go really quickly when you get out, kind of like a dream. So eventually, things filled up in there, lots of shreds of paper, and I was hoping that the whole room would fill it, but it did get kind of filled in there. And he was very animated and really thinking. It's fun working with an actor or actress. I think it becomes, part of them too. I talked with them. I didn't want to give too much direction, as the artist. Usually we're so controlling. But it became kind of like a collaboration, which was really cool. I really liked it. He was a great, great actor. And I love this shot of his foot sticking out. It was a hot day in there, too. Whew. And this brings us to what I'm working on currently. I had a residency. It was actually 2 summers ago at the Minnesota Key. It's the Hermitage Artists Retreat. And I started a series there, which I'm still working on. This is actually the house that was relocated. It's a beautiful place right on the beach. And it really brought me to thinking about the house, of course, was so interesting. I started doing a lot of work about the house because the house was relocated. I thought, this is just like me. Here I am. I'm back here. I'm on the beach. and it started reminding me so much of my childhood. And I started doing a series with some small objects and stories about me remembering really kind of growing up near the beach. I started taking some photos of my nieces and nephews because they're always my models. They're good about that. And kind of going back to my classical training. I was classically trained, drawing more figuratively. This is a small piece. Another smaller piece, just about swimming and that idea that you're in your own world when you're underwater. Nothing else can touch you. You're kind of there with your own thoughts is kind of where I am with the idea. Some stories that came back, I used to think I could hear all the animals talking to me if I put my ears underwater. So I've been working with memories of growing up near the beach. This came from, actually the words that are in here is that whole story of thinking that I could hear these creatures. Even when I put my ears underwater in the bathtub, I could hear them. This was a piece that I had started right when I got there, which is just showed. It's called Growing Turbulence. It was about growing, of course. It has the perfect spiral in there. I was looking a lot at nature and math. And all the words correlated with just being that age, 13, 12, 8, finding out a lot about yourself. It's a pretty turbulent time. I had this great airplane that melted on a light bulb by mistake, which broke. But it was my nephew's, and he gave it to me as a Christmas present. And I'm like, this is the best Christmas present I've ever gotten. And I involved that because, that time, I work with the, age the 13, at least a little bit older. It is a turbulent time, and having it kind of crash in there, finding out you're a woman, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And it's prompted me into my new work that I'm working on. I have the chair, and this was, do you notice the texture on the back, the big circles? That was from the table with the canvas that was on the bottom. That's where this started. So it was fun to work on. I had a conversation there, and I'm having a conversation again with a new piece, but more figurative. These are some new pieces I did over the summer. This is my niece Alice. This is about searching. And these are large scale. This is very much the style I was painting in grad school, earlier grad school, with oils and doing kind of a negative, painting a ground and then pulling out with terps and getting really messy. And these are pretty, this one's like about 5 feet. I work pretty quickly. This one was done probably in 2 days because I don't want the oil to dry too much. So I want it to, really have a lot of life to it. And this is JD. This is called Diving Deeper. And he's diving, and I have a lot of words on the bottom. I didn't get a close-up of that. The words kind of become the texture of the water, and the words are about that blissful moment when you are underwater and you don't have to think about anything else but just swimming and being a child again, which was basically my experience growing up on the beach. And this is the last piece, which I think came out of, thinking of this time, being that age. This one is 13 looking at 31, and it's a couple pieces together. It's another mannequin piece, which I'm planning basically my next adventures to continue a couple more paintings with my swimming series and to finish these mannequins. I have about 3 more mannequins to work on. So this piece, it's a reflection of myself at 13 and a reflection of myself at 31 and how much has changed and how much has stayed the same. The interior, the top actually moves. You can actually spin the bottom around. And inside are words. I have the girls swimming on the bottom platform, and they're constantly coming around each other, reflecting on each other. Of course, the growing idea with all the flowers, I made all those with clay. And here's a wider view. They spin around each other. And then the bottom are kind of all the same idea with my keepsakes. I have my an idea of a diary in there, something when you're younger, and it's kind of in the gut, where you keep everything. And there's old keys that I have. I actually casted all these, just old pieces that I had. And it also went with 2 drawings that were the silhouettes, and all the writing in there is at 13 to the left, kind of where I was, my insecurities, many insecurities at 13. But also, some things that I was surprised. I really thought back to that time. And then to the right side at 31. A lot of things were the same, and a lot of things had changed. But I went through and really tried to dig out my memories from 13 and 31. And 31 was the year that I was, recovering from breast cancer and finding out, I think it was a rebirth for me in some way. And this is just a close-up of them, so you can see that the silhouettes were all made of the text again. And this was my last piece that I've made, and it's kind of where I am now. I believe that's the end. It was a lot of pieces. Thank you.